Good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Leah Smith, and today I am going to talk about a topic that I think sparks a considerable amount of debate, and that's whether so-called victimless crimes should be decriminalized in the United States. Victimless crimes like prostitution, drug use, and gambling are often described as activities that don't directly harm those around them. However, they remain criminalized in most states across the U.S. In contrast, other countries have gone to decriminalize and legalize these regulatory behaviors. So the question is, should we look at these international models, or are there unique reasons these behaviors stay illegal in the United States? And more broadly, should the government regulate morality, or should individuals be free to make their own choices in these matters? So in the United States, we have a long history of criminalizing certain activities that are considered victimless. Prostitution, drug use, and public gambling are the prime examples. The rationale behind these laws has traditionally been rooted in concerns about public morality, safety, and the fear of societal harm. However, the question arises that if no one is directly harmed by these activities, why do we continue to treat them as crimes? Some would argue that even without a direct victim, these activities can cause harm in indirect ways, such as prostitution can fuel human trafficking, illegal drug use can lead to addiction and overdose deaths, and the strain on the healthcare system as well. And these are all considered valid concerns. However, you also need to ask yourself if criminalization is the most effective way to address these certain issues. So first, I want to do my arguments for decriminalization. For these so-called victimless crimes, one of the strongest arguments I found is centered around personal freedom and individual autonomy. In a society that prides itself on liberty, shouldn't adults have the right to make their own decisions about their own lives, and as long as they are not directly harming others? If an adult chooses to gamble, uses drugs, or engages in sex work, it could be argued that those are personal decisions that shouldn't be criminalized. And there are real-world examples we could use to support these, like perspectives. Portugal, for example, in 2001, Portugal decriminalized all drugs, including heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. What were the results? You may ask. A significant reduction in drug-related deaths, HIV infections, and drug-related crimes. The government shifted its focus from criminal prosecution to harm reduction, offering addiction treatment and mental health services instead of just jail time. Portugal's experience suggests that decriminalization can lead to more of a positive health outcome for the public. Another similar example is in the Netherlands and in New Zealand. Prostitution is legal and regulated. These countries have been seen to have a significant reduction in exploitation and violence against sex workers. Along with better access to healthcare systems and safety. By regulating prostitution, these countries have created safer environments for workers and reduced the prevalence of human trafficking and its abuse. These models, too, show that regulation can be far more effective than criminalization in both individual life and in this society. Decriminalization also has economic benefits. Legalizing and regulating activities such as gambling or drug use can generate significant tax revenue. In states like Colorado and California, the legalization of marijuana has resulted in millions of dollars in tax revenue, which can be reinvested into public services like education and healthcare. Finally, decriminalization allows us to focus on public health rather than punishment. Instead of arresting people who use drugs or participate in prostitution, we can focus on offering up addiction treatments, mental health services, and resources to help individuals make safer choices. This approach can be a more compassionate and effective way of treating these individuals than treating these individuals in less harmful ways than engaging in behaviors that may be harmful but not necessarily criminal. Now let's talk about some counter-arguments. While decriminalization does have its merits, there are important reasons why some may argue that certain behaviors should remain illegal. One major concern is the protection of vulnerable individuals. While some individuals may engage in prostitution or drug use voluntarily, there are a significant risk for those exploited. In the case of prostitution, for example, while some sex workers may choose that profession, others are often coerced or trafficked into it. By legalizing it, we could potentially increase its demand for services, leading to more exploitation and trafficking. Similarly, drug use can be linked to addiction, and drug use and drug abuse can have far-reaching consequences for the families and the communities. Some argue that criminalization serves as a deterrent to prevent those individuals from becoming normalized. Another argue against decriminalization is that the government has a responsibility to regulate public morality. Some people believe that certain activities, like prostitution or drug use, should remain illegal because they undermine our societal values and public decency. In their views, the government should take on a more active role in preserving our moral fabric and how society needs to be seen, even if it means limiting our individual freedom. But however, from this perspective, decriminalizing these activities might send us or others the wrong message, especially for our younger generations, and about what is acceptable in today's society. Moreover, there are concerns about the unintentional consequences of decriminalization. For example, when Portugal's drug decriminalization had its positive outcomes, it's also important to recognize that such reforms do take time and are not guaranteed to work everywhere. Legalizing activities like prostitution or drug use can inadvertently lead to new societal challenges, such as increasing addiction rates or increasing the rise in demand for commercial sex. So where does this leave us, however? Do we balance our personal freedoms with societal responsibilities? I mean, it's clear that the government's regulation is important in certain areas, such as ensuring public safety and preventing harm to any of our vulnerable individuals. But we also need to consider whether the government should be regulating personal behavior. Ultimately, we have to ask whether criminalizing certain behaviors is the best way to protect our society, or if we can find more effective ways in addressing these certain issues through regulation and harm reduction. I think a middle ground might be the best solution to, for example, instead of outright criminalizing drug use, we can implement policies that regulate certain substances, ensuring that they are used safely and responsibly. In the case of prostitution, however, we can legalize it, but with strict regulations in place to ensure workers' safety and to prevent trafficking. Lastly, by legalizing gambling, on the other hand, has proven to be a viable and regulated industry in many states, generating both tax revenue and legal safeguard for many of its participants. So to come to a conclusion, while there are valid reasons for maintaining certain restrictions on activities like prostitution, drug use, and gambling, I believe that we need to seriously consider decriminalization as an alternative. Personal freedoms for public health should be centered in shaping our policies, and we can learn a great deal from the experiences of other countries instead of just relying on criminalization. We should explore more harm reduction strategies and regulation to create safer and healthier societies. Thank you.